We're really excited to have everyone today sharing this important topic. We do believe that this is an important topic for paraprofessional staff, but also for supervisors of paraprofessional staff. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Stacey Sparks. I am a university counselor at Millikin University. I am just starting my 7th year at Millikin, which 7 is a favorite number of mine, so I'm looking to have a really awesome year. I truly believe I have the best job ever. I say this to students and staff all the time. I get paid, I think, to love our students. So I think my job is the best job ever. I spend all day just kind of giving that love out and taking care of students. So that's me, Stacey Sparks.
And it's really good to be with you today. My name is Molly Berry. I'm the Director of Residence Life at Millikin University. I'm starting my 6th year with the institution, and I'm really thankful to be in this position, but also be able to work with great professionals like Stacey, working with our students on a daily basis. And if you notice right here on the screen, we have our email addresses, our phone numbers for our office, and then I've also put my Twitter handle out there and would love to connect with folks after the presentation if you have questions or if you just really would love to connect on a professional level. We'd be happy to do so. And we're really excited to have everyone with us today. So without further ado, we'll get started.
So why are you here today? Why is compassion fatigue awareness important to you? I'd like to welcome you, as Molly already did, but welcome students, welcome Res Life folks, welcome paraprofessionals, professionals, supervisors, all of you who are called to help. The call to help isn't necessarily what you might think in so far as what we're talking about today. The call to help might be true for some of you, and for others of you, maybe not. But the call to help that I'm talking about right now is taught at an early age. Were you taught at an early age to take care of others' needs before your own? Just take a second to think about that. Have you ever said to yourself or to anyone else, I'm always helping everyone, but when I need help, there's nobody around? This is what we become comfortable doing, helping others, but when it comes to helping ourselves, we realize that we have no idea how to meet our own needs, and we're not taking care of ourselves. So as helpers, compassion fatigue awareness really is the first step. It can lead you to insight into what you may need to do for yourself, and it's extremely important to your own personal wellness. So what do we mean? Well, we mean to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. We've all heard, I mean, most of us, if we've been, on an airplane, we hear the flight attendants announce that if the cabin loses pressure, the oxygen masks are going to fall down from above. And you have to put on, you're advised to put on your own mask before you try to put on anyone else's or help anyone else. Why? Because it's likely that you're going to pass out if you don't get someone else's, if you don't get your oxygen mask on first, you might pass out and not be able to help anybody else. So what are we saying? This is real and true for helping anyone, anytime, all of the time. You must take care of yourself first if you're going to effectively and consistently be able to help others. So put your oxygen mask on first.
And one of the reasons that Stacey and I are presenting today is because the Health and Wellness Committee sat down back at the Camp Tecumseh retreat in February and said, you know, compassion fatigue is really something that affects all people, especially helpers. And since our paraprofessional staff are by nature helpers, and since we as professionals are by nature in a helper position or a helper profession, we thought this was a great topic that we wanted to challenge our student staff and also professional staff with how to understand this and how to apply this to our lives. So we want to talk a little bit about learning outcomes. So after the webinar, Stacey and I sat down and said participants should be able to identify compassion fatigue within themselves and their colleagues, be able to develop strategies to address symptoms of compassion fatigue, define what personal and professional balance is available for them individually, and develop positive coping mechanisms. And I want to say that again, develop positive coping mechanisms for paraprofessional and for professional staff. So that's really our hope, that after the webinar today, you and your staff can walk away with these 4 learning outcomes to say, absolutely, we learned something from this and we're able to apply it to what we do on a daily basis, and also how we interact with our colleagues and also the people that we supervise or report to. So let's get into some of the meat of what compassion fatigue is. So maybe you entered this webinar with really no idea of what this was, and maybe this comes as second nature to you, but really it's kind of that defining piece that we need to figure out. So for us, what we've learned through this process is a lot about compassion fatigue. Symptoms are very normal displays of chronic stress resulting from the caregiving work that we do. So clearly, if we're in a caregiving profession or a helper profession, this is something that we will see on a daily basis. Stress resulting from caring, or how Stacey said, loving the students and the people that we work with. Caregivers play a host, as it says, to a high level of compassion fatigue. So day in and day out, we struggle to function in caregiving environments that are constantly presenting these heart-wrenching emotional challenges. And I don't know how I can explain that any better than what is already stated. So day in and day out, we're working with people who are asking a lot of us and asking a lot from us. And to feel like we need to fulfill those questions or those demands, we have some stress with that, and we suffer from the hands of that, whether that is emotionally trying to unwind at night or whether that is really just being able to function on a day-to-day basis. And this last line I love. Simply put, these are people who were taught at an early age, like Stacey had explained, to care for the needs of others before caring for their own needs. And I think that many of us who are listening today, or many of us who are attending this webinar, can say that yes, from an early age, maybe I was the oldest child and was taught to care for my siblings before really thinking about myself. Or maybe it's just that I really love to help, and Stacey and I are going to go over that in a little bit later on in the webinar, what that idea is of really loving to help and what that does to us on an emotional level. So just to pull out some of these words from bullet point 1, caregiving work we choose to do, so it's a choice, that's important. We struggle to function in caregiving environments that consistently present heart-wrenching emotional challenges. Absolutely. And finally, caring for the needs of others before caring for my own or our own needs. So that really is what compassion fatigue is. And I think once you put it in those simple 3 bullet points, we can easily see how we each fall into that.
So what compassion fatigue is it's not burnout. A lot of times we talk about feeling burnt out or, just having had enough. And burnout is a situation that's connected to sort of a disappointment or a disenfranchisement of your job responsibilities, your work environment, or lack of support therein. So we're talking about demands outweighing resources in terms of the job. So when we're talking about burnout, we're talking about the job itself, the job responsibilities, the work environment. Compassion fatigue, on the other hand, feels like you've been through trauma too. So compassion fatigue is that exhaustion and that fatigue that's associated with loving, caring, helping others. Compassion fatigue is symptoms similar to, you're experiencing symptoms similar to the people that you're helping because you've heard and experienced the trauma with them. So it's been quoted as a secondary victimization or a secondary traumatic event for you because you're hearing it, you're feeling it, you're helping them through it, and therefore experiencing your own symptoms based on that consistent re-experiencing the trauma with your students, with your clients, or with the people that you're helping. So compassion fatigue is not burnout. Burnout has to do with the job responsibilities themselves or the workplace. Compassion fatigue is like an emotional side effect that we experience when we're loving, helping, and working with people who have been through their own traumas or their own issues.
So now that we've kind of discussed what compassion fatigue is, and we've discussed what compassion fatigue is not, we thought it would be really helpful to go into the 4 phases of compassion fatigue. So we are going to break down each of these bullet points, and what we want you to do is, while we're talking about this, is consider, have I been there? How did I respond? And what did I do to pull myself out or perpetuate what was happening? So what's really important to see is that if you are a helper, you are already experiencing a phase of compassion fatigue. So I want you to understand that really, if you're sitting in on this webinar, it's very possible that you already are within one of these phases. And that's important to know so that you can see how you can cope and help and also respond to some of these influences that we're feeling. So we'll break down these 4 phases. Phase number 1 is the idealist phase. And I think that's where we find a lot of new paraprofessional staff, but also new professionals. So for instance, I am so excited to be starting my new job as a hall director or as an area coordinator. I am motivated by the fact that everything is perfect right now. I have a new job. I'm very excited to have these new colleagues. I am working on this great staff of RAs or residential mentors. I am ready to serve. I'm a go-getter. I'm excited. Okay, that's where we see a lot of our new paraprofessionals. We hire them. We go through the training. They couldn't get enough of Chubby Bunny or any of those icebreakers, and they are ready to go, ready for move-in day. It's this desire to contribute. So we hear a lot of student leaders that say, I just want to affect someone positively. I just want to leave my mark on a student. We hear this a lot within our student leaders. I volunteer to help. I want to help move the bed down the hallway. I want to help move a family up the stairs. I want to be the tour guide on campus, full of energy and enthusiasm and excitement. Life is good. I don't even understand what compassion fatigue could be. I just love my job. And clearly, I think a lot of us fall into this phase because this is the fun phase. This is good. Life is good. But what happens when we transition? And what happens when we hit phase 2?
So this is the phase where, as Molly and I were preparing the webinar, I kind of said, uh-oh, this is it. This is where the irritability sets in. This is where we kind of within ourselves go, okay, the honeymoon's over. I may not be as happy as I thought I was. What's going on? Some of the things that you might look for: cutting corners, avoiding contact with students. This is a time in the semester where I can say personally that if I or my colleagues are doing happy dances when students don't show up for appointments, I know that I'm in the irritability phase.
Absolutely.
I know that I've reached a point where if I'm celebrating no-shows or avoiding that contact, then you know, I'm feeling a little bit of pressure. I know that some of you look at the next bullet point, number 3, mocking your peers or clients as something, oh, I would never do that. You know, and this is what I thought coming into my profession. I would never do that. Well, sometimes when we joke, we laugh, we do what we need to do to feel less of that burden, we can realize by that, wait, I wouldn't really normally do this. Why am I reacting in this way? Why am I trying to avoid? Why am I feeling like irritable with my students or with my peers? Underestimating the wellness needs, so not recognizing that it's time. It's time for me to maybe start working out or maybe make a lunch date with a group of friends, losing concentration and focus. So sometimes we we'll say that we aren't focused or we're not concentrating well because we're not sleeping or because we make these other excuses. But understanding that with compassion fatigue, when we're helpers, when we're helping others, that some of that lack of concentration or lack of focus, some of these sort of symptoms can indicate to us that we're in a different phase moving toward a place that we really don't want to be. And that can also be seen in the symptom, the last bullet point, of distancing oneself from others. If you feel like you're doing that avoidance thing, or you're making inappropriate jokes, or you're feeling that irritability, or you're withdrawing and distancing, putting your arm out and saying, you know what, no, I don't want to go to lunch today, or, no, I don't feel like doing anything after work, that's also a symptom of this phase of, irritability.
Yeah, and I think as a supervisor, I have noticed this in staff members before. So the idea of someone being the first one on time for a meeting, always getting paperwork in on time, and then we start to see cutting the corners a little bit, paperwork starts to come in a bit late, bulletin boards start to go up a bit late, the idea of this person wanting to be the first one out of staff meeting, so can barely wait for staff meeting to be over so they can jet out the door, not wanting to interact. I think that's easily a red flag for me when you work with student staff to say, okay, something's up. This person used to be the go-getter and really excited, and now they can't wait to get out the door, barely on time for things. So those are some red flags from, I think, the irritability stage. And who likes to be around people who are irritable, really? When we think about phase 3, it's really about that withdrawal. So for this, I think some of the signs for this would be losing patience with students or clients. So if you are a student staff member, when you get that angry, or when you get that third or fourth or fifth text or email or knock on the door, do you stop answering your door? Do you stop answering your phone? Is this when you send the email at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning that's really angry to your floor or to your student leader or students? This is the phase where people start to become very defensive. So as a supervisor, if I reach out to my staff member to say, hey, I've noticed that things are a little bit tricky now and maybe you're not as attentive as you once were, this might be the blow-up phase. So straw that broke the camel's back, and the person is yelling and shouting and I'm fine, I don't know why everyone keeps asking me about this, I'm just stressed right now. So that's the withdrawal phase. It's this idea from the next step. Basically, Stacey was saying maybe it's a good idea to start working out or really taking, thoughts about your own wellness into hand. Well, this is really the stage where you start to neglect yourself and others. So who cares about my own wellness, and who cares about Susie's wellness down the hall? I don't care about her anymore because she can do her own thing. I mean, it's really this idea of I'm starting to really shut down, chronically fatigued, so it's this idea of constantly being tired, can't get enough naps in, can't sleep long enough, oversleeping for some classes, constantly looks like you're in and out of a nap. So if I see students in the hallway that look like they just got out of bed and they look like that all day long, maybe that's part of that. It's this idea of losing hope and viewing oneself as a victim. So what does that mean if I view myself as a victim when I'm the one that signed on for this position, knowing what it would be and knowing what the job would be? If I start to see that as victimization, that's a really hard place to be. And finally, it's not just withdrawal, but it's isolating myself from others. So I kept thinking, this is kind of the phase where the doors are always shut. Or if I'm in my room, my door is shut. I pretend that I'm not home. I don't answer the door. You know it gets really bad when I'm going to shut my phone off. So if I am shutting my phone off so that I don't have to receive the texts or the updates or anything like that from people, you know that we're in the withdrawal phase. That's the major uh-oh. And then I think as a supervisor, if I'm noticing maybe someone come in and just collapsing on my floor, just to lay there, I think, oh man, like this might be one of those moments where we've reached a point. So maybe that's where we are. And this isn't just with the job or just with the position of leadership or the position of helping people. This is also bleeding into classes and home and my relationships with my friends or my colleagues. So this is really taking over emotionally a big part of my life. So not just the job that I can shut off. This is a big piece of everything. So that's phase 3.
Okay, so in phase 4, you'll see that it's called the zombie phase. Phase 4 is when irritability and withdrawal turn into anger. Viewing others as ignorant or incompetent, the first bullet, where your irritability or your dissatisfaction becomes pointing the finger at another person and saying, they're stupid, they don't know what they're talking about, or they don't know what they're doing, they're not doing their job right, where it's sort of an angry response. The next bullet, in losing patience and your sense of humor and your zest for life, where you realize within your own personal livelihood you are down, almost feeling signs of depression, symptoms of sadness, and all those things that we associate with feeling depressed. The anger comes out in your dislike or disdain toward others. Someone who you enjoy being around typically, maybe you're just, they're on your last nerve and you really don't want to hang out with them. And the fourth bullet, becoming easily enraged, that your anger is overt. You're getting angry at people and showing them your anger. The zombie phase is so real, and it feels so bad when it happens because it's difficult, I think, to understand how you've entered into this phase and why you would be acting like with such anger. It's when you become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. So if you remember back to phase 1, when you just entered into your new position and you're excited to be here and you're an idealist and everything is positive and you're feeling very good about the upcoming semester or whatnot, you are part of that solution at that point. You've become the helper because you are interested in helping find those solutions. This phase, the zombie phase, after you've moved through irritability and withdrawal and become angry, you're now part of the problem. So it's so important to you to recognize these signs and symptoms because you want to be that helper. You don't want to become the zombie, become the angry person. You want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
And I want people to take a moment to just think about these 4 phases. So the idea that from the start, we are all entering into one of these phases, and we're at different points probably of that. Where do we see ourselves now? Have you seen yourself in one of the other phases? Maybe last year, maybe a month ago, maybe currently. Where are you? And then how do we pull out of that? So it's the idea of, now what? So now what? We've got the point of pathology and victimization, or we have an option, maturation and renewal choice. So what's really positive, I think, about compassion fatigue and the idea of finding myself in one of these phases, and maybe I don't like that I have a choice. So I can choose the choice of no action taken. So I become very overwhelmed. I consider leaving my position and leaving, and I develop this illnesses, and just somatic illnesses kind of come with that. So when I'm not taking care of myself and when I'm ignoring all of the warning signs, illnesses will pop up and things will pop up to slow me down and to say, hello, pay attention to me. Hi, you can't ignore me. So that's one option. Or this other option, which is a renewal choice. So worker acknowledges, yes, I have symptoms of compassion fatigue, and I need to take action to overcome it, which will make me stronger and resilient and transformative when it comes to talking about life. I can transform where I am right now. And I think this is the human cost associated with compassion fatigue, because we can take a look at that first step, which is no action, or that first option, which is no action. And we see diminished job performance, we see increased tardiness and absenteeism. It's this idea of declining physical health or poor morale or low energy and all of these stressed personal relationships. And I really love that visual. It's the idea of being stretched too thin and stressed personal relationships. And that's never a good place to be, especially if we are interpersonal people with interpersonal positions. But there's such hope in this piece because it's this idea of acknowledging what compassion fatigue is and then how we work with that.
Okay, so we're talking about choices, and Molly, you mentioned choices and the renewal choice. It's a choice. Are we going to take no action or are we going to take action? Choices, at the first bullet point, option 1 and option 2, I'd like to first tell you about option 1. Option 1 not being the two choices that we just talked about, the no action taken versus action taken, but now I'm talking about these life options, and I'm going to call it life, and if you could see me, I'm making little air quotes with my fingers. The life option of, hey, it's going to be okay. That's option 1. Option 2, the life option of the pathology and the human cost that Molly just talked about. It's not going to be okay. Option 2 would be, my job doesn't matter. I don't care anymore. I'm late. I'm skipping work. I don't feel good. I have no energy. My relationships are suffering. I'm going to go get drunk. I'm depressed. I am pissed. Those options are option 2. So back to life options 1, it's going to be okay. Option 2, it's not going to be okay, and all those sort of pathological things that I just talked about. What I want to say to you today, option 2 is not an option. We're not going for option 2. We're going for option 1, which means we're making a choice to say, this is going to be okay, and this is what I need to do to make it okay. You make a choice right now, today, with this webinar, hearing this information, understanding what compassion fatigue is, understanding the phases that you go through and recognizing it before you get to that phase, the zombie phase, where you're just angry at the world. Make the choice right now today to help you help yourself. We talk about the ideal as helping others help themselves. Can we agree on this? And just take a second to think about that. Are we in this to help people help themselves? Fixing it for people, is that why we're in this? Are we in this to get people to help themselves? Or are we in this to fix it for people? Hopefully your answer is the first, that you're in it to help people help themselves. If we are trying our best to help you help yourself to do what's best for you, we must, as the helpers, show people how to do that. And that means that you learn to help you help yourself. So how can you do this? There are 4 bullet points listed under Help You Help Yourself. The first is a link to a website that Molly and I found very helpful. There are self-tests on the website to understand what compassion fatigue is and the symptoms involved and whether or not you're experiencing any of them. There's the information on compassion fatigue, what it is, what it isn't, and lots of other, we love the website. It's very informative, very good. Obviously, counseling services, wherever you are and whatever you're doing on any college campus, you've got counseling services there waiting, ready, able to help you. Your supervisor, going to your supervisor, having that relationship with your supervisor, and that you trust them to understand that this is a common, understandable part of being a helper, and that they're there to help you help yourself. And then the you question, which is, how are you? The you question. Ask yourself on a daily, maybe sometimes an hourly basis, what do I need right now? If you are someone who identifies with the statement, oh, I'm always helping everybody else, but when I need something, where's everybody? Where are the people that can help me? Or if you identify with the concept of being raised or being taught at an early age to think of others before yourself, which is an admirable quality. If you can identify with these statements or with these concepts, then you are a person who needs to learn to say to yourself, what do I need? And answer that question. What is the answer to that? What are your needs? How can you take care of yourself? What do you need to do for you today? And I just want to, before I'm finished with this slide, go back to the first bullet point, that option 1 and option 2, and remind you, option 1 is it's going to be okay. Option 2 is it's not going to be okay, and option 2 is not an option for us. We've got to make it okay by figuring out what we need and putting our own oxygen mask on first.
Now, one of the things that we really wanted to talk about is this idea of from the student lens and also from the supervisor lens. So however you identify as you're listening to the webinar today or participating in the webinar, I want you to think about some of these things. So students that are out there today, do you know yourself? Is compassion fatigue a possibility for your personality? And I'm going to say probably most likely. If you are listening to the webinar today, you probably have the possibility for compassion fatigue to be a part of who you are. So knowing your leadership position or your job or your responsibilities as a helper, you have to think about how you want to handle this. So Stacey just went over the 2 options. Number 2 really not being an option. So we need to think, so how do I identify in myself that compassion fatigue is happening and I'm at phases 2, 3, or heaven forbid 4? How do I pull myself out of that, and how do I identify to say, hey, I need some help. Woo, over here. How can I be helped? Hello. And it's really like that start of the conversation of how to talk to your supervisor about this. So I really hope that you have the ability to sit down in your supervisor's office and say, I'm really struggling, or I feel like I'm getting to that point. And my suggestion would be have that conversation today when you're hopefully in phase 1 and you're loving life and you're loving your job, to say, I might hit a wall. Maybe you know it's going to happen in the spring semester. Maybe you just know yourself and the end of the first semester is really difficult for you. So whether that's that like November winter break kind of place, to say, I need you to talk to me like this if you see this happening in me. So as a student or as a person who's being supervised, go to your supervisor and say, I want you to have this conversation and this is how I want you to do it, because I know that this is the only thing that's going to snap me out of it. And if you know yourself and you know that this is a possibility for your personality, that's a great conversation to happen today when you're feeling good and you're only in phase 1. The other thing that you'll see on this slide is a link at the bottom, and this is for the Professional Quality of Life Scale, and it links right to the website that Stacey and I have been referencing throughout the entire webinar, and it's a really lovely breakdown of a self-assessment, and you can score yourself on how you're feeling and where you are at that present time. And maybe it's not important to use that today, but to print that off or keep this link and use it 6 weeks down the road when you know things are going to get rough, or right at the beginning of November, or right at the beginning of January or February when you're entering again into a new semester and you have to think about your position again in a new semester. So that's a good thing to think about from the student perspective. So compassion fatigue from the supervisor lens. So all of the supervisors out there, here's what I want you to start thinking about. How do I set up expectations with my staff? And this is a staff of paraprofessionals or professionals to say, how do you want me to address this if I see this happening in you? So if I see the zombie sitting across from me in the chair at a one-on-one, how do I say to you, okay, here's what I'm noticing, without blowing it off the gasket, right? So without exploding in the middle of the room and just stomping out in a fit of rage, how do we have that conversation today when we're in a good place to talk about maybe 6 months down the road when we're not? Also, how do I address these signs if I see them? So what do I need to say? I don't want to trigger anger, so how do I use my language appropriately to talk about the problem before it happens? The idea from a supervisor's perspective of communicating proactively. So instead of being reactive and reacting to the blow up or the meltdown or the distancing, we say that now, okay, what are we going to do when this happens? What are we going to do when we cross this bridge? When I see you crumpled on my floor in a fit of sobs or quiet or whatever, how do we talk about that now? And how do you want me to address it then when it happens? So for me, this is not a matter of if with some students. It's a matter of when. And I think all of us who find ourselves within the helper profession, it's always a matter of when. Because right now, things might feel good, and it's August, and we know how busy August is. But what happens down the road when things start to shift a bit? We get into a normal routine, and it's really more draining than we anticipated, whether it's a group of students or a particular floor, or for our first-year mentors out there, a particular class that's really draining. Like, what happens with that? And finally, what partnerships do I seek out on campus that can assist my student staff or my professional staff in some of these areas? So I am so thankful to work on a campus with Stacey Sparks and have her at, a phone call away to say, Stacey, I'm seeing my staff struggle. Can you come in and talk to us? Can you see this person? Do you have some free time today? And maybe that's for me. Stacey, I need some help. I'm not having a great day, and it's not just a day, it's kind of a series of days. So what happens, and how do I identify this for supervisors? What if this is me? So it's so easy to say, oh, compassion fatigue, stage 2, and that student right there. Oh, compassion fatigue, stage 3, and that person right there. But it's hard to look in the mirror and say, hi, Molly Berry, compassion fatigue, stage 3. So how do we do that? And what happens when this is me? And can I lean on my colleagues? Or maybe not. Are there areas on campus for me to really exercise that wellness that I need to be a whole, rounded person?
So thank you, Molly, and it's so good to work on a campus with you as well. What attitudes or challenges do we think contribute to the experience of compassion fatigue versus maintaining emotional wellness? Let's think a little bit about our attitudes or our challenges that we may or may not be aware of that could contribute to feeling or experiencing compassion fatigue versus doing those things that we talked about, making the choice to help oneself. Making good choices. Let's talk about self-esteem real quick. Self-esteem, making good choices. Ask yourself this question. Do I feel empowered to make positive decisions? Now, I am assuming, and I am making an assumption, I will admit that right now, I'm assuming that everyone said, yes, I feel empowered to make positive decisions. The case is true that as you're feeling fatigued throughout the semester, as you're helping to the point of forgetting about yourself, which we all do, it's going to happen, just bank on it happening. You may slip into an area where you're thinking, not thinking, actually not thinking, where your decision-making is feeling not so empowered. It's feeling more negative. You are empowered today. You feel the empowerment. You can make positive decisions, even when things start feeling negative. So making good choices. Again, option 1, make the choice. Option 2, not an option. It's got to be okay. What do you need to do to make it okay? Let's talk about helping is my job. I like to help because it's my job. Making this excuse because it bolsters your self-esteem. I'm good at my job. Helping is my job. How can you tell me to help me? I'm supposed to be helping everybody else. Why would I go for a run or go work out at the disc on campus at Millikin, where we call our gym is the disc? Why would I want to go work out, or why would I want to go for a run, or why would I want to go for a massage or do something good for me if I've got 20 residents who need my help today? Helping is my job, and I'm good at it. That's why I was hired to do this. This is something that I think many, many of us do. A lot of my self-esteem is based in knowing that I love well and help well, and so do you, and that's why you're listening to me talk to you today. But we have to be able to see our worth and our value as separate from our ability to help, or see our worth and our value in being able to help ourselves first, being able to put our own oxygen mask on first. So helping is my job. Yes, it is your job, but it is not your ticket to ignoring yourself. Keep in mind that you are not, if you're experiencing the symptoms of compassion fatigue, you're not bad at helping. You're human. If you identify with this webinar at some point and you're like, oh my gosh, you know what, I remember them talking about this anger and this withdrawal, and I'm just not myself. It doesn't mean you're bad at helping. It doesn't mean you're bad at your job. It means you're human, and it means you're just like the rest of us. Boundaries. My office at Millikin is my safe zone. Why? Well, my office sort of makes it very easy for me to open or shut my door. So I'm in an office that has 4 walls and a couple of doors, and I can open or close those doors as I see fit. My sessions in counseling have a time limit. This makes it easy for me. But when I think about you, I think, gosh, I don't know, how would you do that? Is it appropriate to shut your door? You live with the people you're helping. So how do you begin to understand how to set your boundaries? Does it become that your room and your sanctity is within your room and where you stay, and that you do need to shut your door at times and be safe within those 4 walls and that closed door? Does it mean that you learn phrases like, oh, that's a great question, I'll get back to you on that, or I don't have time right now, but certainly I have time over the lunch hour, how's that for you? What does it mean to you? What do boundaries mean to you? Just because you haven't had a lot of experience setting boundaries doesn't mean that you will have trouble doing it. It's just a matter of practice and being aware of how to set those boundaries and what to say in setting those boundaries. Setting boundaries in your space as Res Life folks becomes essential to your well-being. Are you prepared to set those boundaries to protect yourself, your time, and your emotional state? Finally, the oh-so-addictive nature of helping. Molly said in the last slide, hi, my name is Molly Berry, and I'm a helper. I mean, something to the effect of, you know, this, hi, my name's Stacey Sparks, and I was born to be a helper. Hi, Stacey. Are we addicted? Are we addicted to helping? I think that sometimes it can become addictive for these reasons that I'm speaking of. It makes us feel good. We're raised to do it. We were taught to do it at a young age. It bolsters our self-esteem. It's awesome. Helping others is awesome, and it makes us feel great. So unlike drugs and alcohol, which you can become addicted to as well, helping should be good. You know, you think drugs and alcohol as an addiction. Sure, I mean, that's an obvious one. But helping, how could that be addictive? Well, it's the same effect, right? Because we're talking about feeling good. We're talking about, you know, think about the choices that you make to go out and drink, or that people might make if they choose to, you know, do drugs or substances. We're trying to escape, or we're trying to feel good, or we're trying to do this sort of behavior, where helping, well, we can kind of see how helping would be the same sort of feel-good substance. So you got to ask yourself, is it an addiction? Do I help? For what reason? I'm helping to show others how to help oneself. Again, we're back to the question of, am I in this to help you help yourself, or am I in this to fix it for you? Helping can become an addiction. And if you're using it to bolster yourself or make yourself feel good, you got to think about the other things that make yourself feel good. Does it make you feel good to go running? Does it make you feel good to read a book? Does it make you feel good to connect with your parents? Does it make you feel good to blank? You fill in the blank for you.
I love the conversation about boundaries and the nature of helping, because I think that's where we get stuck. I think that's the part that just is really difficult to kind of work with. So we talk about balance. What do you mean balance? I can't be balanced. This isn't a balanced position. I'm not a balanced person. Well, I would like to argue that. because for me, it's this idea of living wellness. So instead of helping this person because it means I don't have to go back to my room, which I know is empty, and where I know I have to face what's actually struggling or what I'm struggling with, it's this idea of living wellness. And what are those 6 or 7 dimensions for you? Are you able to identify where your holes are as a person and then talk to someone about how you fill that gap? Because I know that if I'm having these holes in my wellness, I could go to Stacey or go to my colleagues and say, how do I fill this? I'm just struggling. I need more balance in this area. I need more interpersonal balance or social wellness balance or even environmental balance. How can I do this? So it's kind of having that conversation and starting that with the people that you're close to, so your colleagues, your co-RAs, your paraprofessional staff members. How do we do that? Part of it and part of balance is knowing thyself. And we've probably said that probably 5 times in this webinar, the idea of knowing who you are, where your limits are, and also that you can't hide anymore, or at least you can't hide forever. Personally, do I know what I need? And professionally, do I know what I need? And I think what's challenging about our positions in residence life or in the helper profession is that personally and professionally, that line gets blurred so easily. I mean, shades of gray. It's just this idea that, I mean, this could be personally with me, with this friend I have down the hall, but it's also professionally because isn't that what I get paid to do in one way or the other? So really, it's kind of these blurred lines that we really have to make sense of and sit down and really chart out and figure out what works the best for us. But the final thing that we want to come back to is this idea of empowerment. We have choices. Compassion fatigue isn't the nail in the coffin or the end-all be-all. It is a choice that we can make to figure out how we get to that path of hope and recovery. And I think because it's a choice, we're empowered because of this. It's not the end of the road for us where, oh, we've hit that zombie phase, guess we're done, you know, game over. It's really the idea of, okay, I can still make a choice today to improve the rest of this path for me. And maybe that choice is to step back from the role a little bit. Maybe that choice is to sit down and talk to my supervisor to say, I thought I could do it all and I can't. And I don't know how to start this whole process of realizing I can't do it all. And maybe it's just the option of, okay, I'm going to build more time in for me, or I'm going to stop this position on campus because I really can't do it anymore, and I'm not giving enough justice. I'm not doing the position justice. So let's give it to someone else who can. And I know that's a hard decision to make, but I think that's the important decision to make, especially when it comes to balance and living well. So finally, as we wrap up and get ready to answer some questions that you may have, or just hear some thoughts that you've had during the webinar, we wanted to list our resources. So we've mentioned compassionfatigue.org a few times. This is also the professional quality of life assessment. So this is a great one, bullet point 2, to use with staff members or to use with even our colleagues to say, hey, let's identify this now or in 6 months or in 6 weeks. And some of our information was taken from Deborah Lookabill, who's a master of social work, and she talks about burnout and compassion fatigue syndrome, which is where some of the idea of the 4 phases came from. So at this time, we'd be really happy to take any questions or any comments that any of the groups listening may have based on compassion fatigue.
Molly, I have one question that's come in online too. Is compassion fatigue common? I'll start us off, and then we'll see what else we get. But the first question was, is compassion fatigue common?
That's a great. I think we can both probably answer that.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, we've kind of listed in the webinar that, in my opinion, I think compassion fatigue is common, especially when we find ourselves in helper professions, and residence life is very much a helper customer service kind of profession. So I would say in our realm of this tiny slice of the universe, yes, I would say that's very common.
Mm-hmm. I actually agree with Molly. I think that my assessment, it's not based on statistical knowledge or anything like that, because I don't have that available to me right now. But what I do know is, in working through the webinar and the phases, how much I see in not only myself, and have experienced so much myself, but in the students that I meet with, semester by semester by semester, and how, a lot of our student leaders who I've worked with, often express that sort of symptomatology. So I really do think it's common. I don't know if, a full-blown 4-phase compassion fatigue syndrome is always so common, but I really think that, it just feels to me like this would all hit home for most of us. So I think that the symptoms are common, and that we definitely experience some of them as we go through, our semesters.
And I think, even if we think of, as a supervisor, if I think of the students who were an RA for me for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, but then you just start to realize that they don't have the love for the position that they had anymore. And we see that in veteran returner staff members, especially paraprofessional staff. To me, those students hit a place within the compassion fatigue spectrum and say, I can't do this anymore. I just can't give myself like this. And they make a choice, and the choice is, I think, even though that's removing themselves from the position, I think that's like one of those positive choices that Stacey was saying, to back up and say, okay, this isn't where I need to be right now, so I'm going to make a choice to stop being an RA or a first-year mentor or whatever, move on to something new, and in that way it provides a balance in their life. So, I think that's hard from a supervisor perspective, but sometimes the best decision for the student.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, I don't know if, Molly, I'm going to ask a question myself.
Great.
Will we get verbal questions, or do we just have questions that are going to come up on the computer? Maybe Eric?
I think it's just through the computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
At this point, we have questions coming in on the computer. We've only received the ones I passed on to you. So
okay.
If anybody does have any questions, now is a great time to submit those.
Great. I can move on to this next question.
Great.
Not sure, but I will just read it as it's stated. Being balanced is often a great strength, is it not? So
I think, yeah, I would say yes, it is. But I would also say that I think the phrase work-life balance is a funny one when you're talking to people who work and live in the same place. So
yes,
RAs, residence life professionals. So this idea of work-life balance is always something that just cracks me up. But really, I think it's about wellness and not the balance piece, because if you are operating off of this fulfillment of wellness and feeling good and like seeking the things that you need to for your own person, then balance is that it comes secondhand for me. But I think that's just me personally.
That makes a lot of sense. I like the way you answered that. I don't see any other questions right now, and I wanted to go back to one thing before we're finished, and that is to remind everyone listening that you are good at helping. You wouldn't be on this call right now if you weren't. So you're a good helper. What we need you to remember always in knowing that you're a good helper is how to maintain that good helping status. And just to remind you that loving you first, putting on your oxygen mask first, is going to be the ticket to maintenance, the ticket to maintaining your goodness. And that is that you are in this because you love it, because you have passion, because you want to do this and you're good at it. So just figure out how to maintain that level of performance and that level of loving you.
Well said.
I have another question.
Great.
Oh, it's a thank you. You're welcome, Matt. He's saying he just wanted to say thank you for presenting. I learned a lot more than he thought he would, and great job, ladies. Thank you. Thank you. Much love to you.
Great. Thank you. And I just want to say good luck to all the folks out there that are getting ready to open residence halls, and many already have, and a good luck to the start of the semester for everybody.
Yay. Yes, ditto.
All right, well, since that's the end of our questions, I want to just say thank you again for presenting. This is such a great and relevant topic, and I'm so proud to be a part of GLACUHO where we can offer great professional development like this to our audience at no charge. So thank you again for presenting. If any of you would like to view this presentation again or perhaps share it with colleagues, the entire video/audio will be available. It'll be posted on YouTube, but we do link to it from our website. So again, that's www.glacuho.org. Click on the resources heading and then look for webinar archives. You'll be able to see it on there. Wish everyone the best with training and with the upcoming Residence Hall opening, and hope everyone has a great academic year. Thanks.
Eric, can I make one more shout out?
Of course.
Millikin RAs, Molly and I love you too. Ellen, we love you too.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Eric.
Have a great day.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.